The quitclaim deed was in the second drawer, filed between vendor invoices like it belonged there. My name on the grantor line, my signature, the looping L, the crossbar on the H, transferring Hargrove Securities' entire vehicle fleet to something called Pratt Security Solutions, LLC, valued at $340,000. My hands shook. I pressed them flat against the desk until the tremor stopped. 8 years in Army, CID, studying forgeries. This one was mechanical, uniform pressure. No variation. A traced copy, not a living hand. I photographed every page under the desk lamp, set the deed back in the exact position, closed the drawer. The office was silent, just the fluorescent hum and my own pulse hammering behind my ears. Through the window, headlights swept across the parking lot, my wife Jocelyn's car. She rekeyed the whole thing. But I'm getting ahead of myself. To understand what she stole, you need to understand what we built. I enlisted the week after high school graduation, 18 years old, 160 pounds, and certain I knew everything about the world. The Army fixed that in about 4 days. 8 years in Criminal Investigation Division, specializing in fraud and document forgery. I processed cases on 3 continents. Procurement scams, falsified requisitions, forged authorizations. The work taught me one thing above everything else. A signature is a fingerprint. Every person writes differently. Pressure, speed, angle, the tiny hesitations where muscle memory takes over from conscious thought. You can copy what a signature looks like. You can't copy how it was made. I left the service at 26. My mother had pancreatic cancer, and my father Vernon needed me at the shop. The shop was a key-cutting operation on Route 13, wedged between a dry cleaner and a tax preparer in a strip mall that smelled like fabric softener and brass shavings. Vernon had run it alone since 1976. One man, one bench of scarred maple with decades of key filings embedded in the grain, one truck with his name on the door. He'd look up from a blank, blow the brass shavings off with one sharp breath, and hand the finished key to the customer before they'd finished filling out the receipt. He cut keys for every household and business within 20 miles. People trusted him because he showed up when he said he would and charged what he quoted. No contracts, no website, just a handshake and a receipt written on carbon paper. My mother died 11 weeks after my discharge. Vernon didn't take a day off. He was at his bench at 6 the next morning, cutting keys because that's what he knew how to do. I stayed. We grew. Over 25 years, we turned that one bench shop into Hargrove Security. 6 trucks, 12 employees, commercial access control systems for over 40 businesses across 3 Ohio counties. We wired the county courthouse. We installed master key systems for the school district, mid-6-figure revenue. The Hargrove name on every door we serviced. Vernon still showed up at 6 every morning. 78 years old, wiry as a fence post, hands still steady enough to cut a medical blank clean. His memory was slipping. He'd ask the same question twice in an hour, forget a customer's name mid-sentence, so he carried a pocket voice recorder everywhere. Little silver Olympus, no bigger than a cigarette lighter. He'd press record and mumble reminders to himself. Appointment at 2. Mrs. Kendall needs a recce. Tell Levi about the Schlage order. He set it on the bench when he worked and let it run for hours. I married Jocelyn Pratt when I was 27. She answered phones at a dentist's office downtown and kept the appointment book like a military operation. Not a single overlap in 3 years. I believed it. She was the most organized person I'd ever met. I brought her into the business. She took over billing, client management, accounts payable. Within 2 years, she'd landed our first commercial contract, a chain of auto dealerships that needed master key systems across 6 locations. She modernized the invoicing, built a client database, made us look like a real company instead of two guys in a strip mall. Something loosened in my shoulders the day I handed her the books. Like setting down a rucksack after a long march. I let her run the office and never looked at the financials again. 23 years. Not once. The morning I found that deed, I'd come in early because the office lock felt wrong. New cylinder. Tighter action, different pin depth under my pick. Jocelyn had rekeyed the front door without telling me. A locksmith notices these things. I noticed, and it put a cold wire of suspicion through my gut that sent me looking through drawers I hadn't opened in years. Vernon was at his bench. 6 a.m., same as always. Brass shavings curling off a blank under the magnifying lamp, catching the light like flecks of gold. He was humming something I didn't recognize. The recorder sat beside his elbow, red light on, capturing everything and nothing. He didn't know the business bearing his name had already been signed away. My throat tightened. I turned away before he could see my face. That night, I didn't confront her. I sat in the garage among 300 antique padlocks, a Victorian Brahma in my calloused hands, turning it under the dim overhead light. Every lock has a design flaw. Every mechanism has a weakness the maker never saw. You just have to find the first pin that gives. Subscribe right now because YouTube is about to decide if you ever hear from me again. Tell me in the comments, what do you think happens next? The next morning, the desk sergeant at Cedar Falls Police Department listened for 11 minutes. I'll give him that. He took notes on a yellow legal pad while I laid the photocopy of the forged quitclaim deed on the counter between us and walked him through the signature analysis. Uniform pressure. No pen lift variation. Traced reproduction. He set his pen down. Mr. Hargrove, I understand this is upsetting, but forged signatures on property documents, that's a civil matter. You'd need to consult an attorney and file through county court. Someone forged my name on a legal document and used it to transfer $340,000 worth of business assets to a company I've never heard of. I hear you. But between spouses, this kind of thing, the courts handle it through civil proceedings. My hands are tied. So, what do you suggest? He capped his pen. Honestly? Talk to her. Work it out. A lot of times these things are misunderstandings. I picked up my photocopy and walked out. Same papers I walked in with. Dale Whitfield's office sat above the hardware store on Main Street. Window A unit rattling against the April chill. Diplomas in drugstore frames on wood-paneled walls. Whitfield was 60, semi-retired, the kind of small-town attorney who handled wills and property disputes and considered a DUI an exciting week. He studied the deed under his desk lamp for 2 full minutes. This is fraud, clear as day, he said. The notarization alone is enough to raise red flags. But here's the problem. He leaned back. Civil litigation on something like this? You're looking at 2 to 3 years minimum. $80,000 in legal fees, probably more. And her attorney can file motions to stall until you can't afford to keep fighting. My jaw tightened. So I'm supposed to watch her strip the business while the courts take their time. I'm telling you the reality. The civil system moves slow. He paused, pulling off his reading glasses. Ruth Ackerman, over in Licking County, sent a title company owner to prison 3 years ago on a deed forgery case. She does not go easy on document fraud. But that was criminal, not civil. And for criminal, you need the prosecutor's office, which means you need evidence that makes the police take this seriously. I wrote Ackerman's name in my notebook, underlined it. First Federal Savings was 3 blocks east. The branch manager, Phil Garrity, had known Vernon for 30 years. He pulled up Hargrove Securities account records on his screen, and something shifted in his expression before he turned the monitor toward me. 31 wire transfers over 9 months. Every one initiated by Jocelyn using her authorized signer credentials. Every memo line read consulting fees or equipment leasing. Every destination was the same account. Pratt Security Solutions, LLC. Total, $287,000. The same company from the quitclaim deed. She'd been draining the business from 2 directions: on paper through forged deeds, and in cash through the wire. I gripped the armrest of my chair until the wood grain pressed white lines into my palm. The most recent transfer was dated 4 days ago. She was still moving money. "Phil, can you freeze the account? Reverse any of these?" He shook his head. "She's an authorized signer, Levi. The bank has no basis to block transactions from a party with legitimate access. These all went through proper channels. Her login, her authorization codes. As far as our system's concerned, these are valid." He paused. "And if we flag the account, she'll be notified. You should know that. $287,000. Valid. I know how it sounds. But my recommendation: get your attorney to petition the court for an emergency freeze. That's the fastest route." I thanked him and left. The spring air hit my face, still carrying that raw April edge. 3 doors. 3 locked. Same papers in my hand. That evening, Gail Hempstead stayed behind after the last technician clocked out. Gail was our bookkeeper, 58, 20 years at Hargrove Security, the kind of woman who brought banana bread on Mondays and remembered every employee's kid's birthday. She stood in the doorway of the office, twisting her car keys. "Levi, I need to show you something. I could be wrong, and I don't want to cause any trouble, but—" She trailed off, opened her bottom desk drawer, and pulled a black and white marbled composition book from beneath a box of paper clips. The word "questions" was penciled on the cover. "I could be wrong about some of these, but these numbers don't add up, hun. Haven't for months." I opened it. Gail's careful handwriting filled page after page. Dated entries, transaction amounts, account numbers. 8 months of discrepancies, vendor names she'd never encountered, consulting fee payments with no corresponding invoices, account transfers initiated without purchase orders. In the margins, her penciled notes: "No PO on file. As J told, accounting correction. Never heard of this company." One entry had a sticky note flagged in yellow. "Jocelyn told vendor on phone. Levi approved this. He just forgets things lately." Not true. Never discussed. "Why didn't you say something sooner?" She looked at the floor. "I asked Jocelyn twice. She told me to stop second-guessing the bookkeeping. Third time, she said if I couldn't handle the new system, maybe it was time to think about retirement." Gail's voice dropped. "I need this job, Levi. But I couldn't throw the notebook away. Something about it just wasn't right." I closed the book. "You did the right thing, Gail." The next morning, I drove to the Licking County Recorder's office in Newark. The morning was warmer. April finally committing to spring. The building smelled like old paper and toner. I walked to the counter and requested the full instrument index for 2 names across the last 18 months. Hargrove, Pratt. The clerk came back with a stack of file folders. 7 quitclaim deeds. The first was the vehicle fleet transfer I'd already photographed in the office. The other 6 were new. Each one bore my forged signature on the grantor line. Each one transferred a different Hargrove security asset. Equipment inventories, commercial lease assignments, client contract portfolios. Each one carried the same notary seal in the lower right corner, a name I didn't recognize, stamped in blue ink, identical across all 7 documents. And every single filing date corresponded to a week I was out of state on commercial service calls. She'd timed each one for when I was 100 miles away. My fingers went cold. The same dead nerve feeling you get gripping a pick too long in winter. I set the folders down and stood at that counter for a long time, reading the LLC registration for Pratt Security Solutions. Filed in Fairfield County, one county over, different jurisdiction, harder to cross-reference. Registered agent at a UPS store mailbox. Sole member manager, Brooke Pratt. My sister-in-law, Jocelyn's younger sister. The woman who'd sat at my Thanksgiving table 5 months ago, who'd taught my son Tanner to play gin rummy on our back porch, who'd held my hand at my mother-in-law's funeral, and said, "You're the best thing that ever happened to this family." My sternum ached like someone had driven a fist into it. Brooke was a paralegal. She knew how to file documents, how to register an LLC, how to make paperwork look routine. But she didn't design this. The 7 deeds, the staggered filing dates, the neighboring jurisdiction, the notary who stamped every document. This was a master key system, and every one of these deeds was a pin that tumbled in sequence. Someone who understood property law, filing jurisdictions, and notary requirements had drawn the blueprints. And I'd shaken that person's hand in my own office. Miles Keating, the name on every notary seal across all 7 forged deeds. At the county recorder's office, the stamp had read M.R. Keating, S.Q., Notary Public. The initials hadn't registered. But sitting at the shop computer that evening after closing, staring at the full name I'd written in my notebook, something turned over in my gut. I knew a Miles Keating. I typed the name into the Ohio Secretary of State's notary registry first. The record confirmed he was a licensed attorney. Then I searched the Ohio State Bar Association's attorney lookup. The results loaded in 3 seconds. Keating Legal Consulting. Practice area, family law. Specialization, dissolution of marriage, asset division, spousal support. License 2004. Active status, office address on Broad Street in Columbus. Not a financial advisor, a divorce attorney. The screen blurred. I blinked hard and read it again. Family law, dissolution of marriage. The same Miles Keating who'd sat in my office 18 months ago. Jocelyn had brought him in for what she called a financial modernization consultation. He wore a blue suit and a confident handshake, sat across from me, and recommended restructuring our asset portfolio for tax efficiency, suggested moving vehicle titles into a separate LLC for liability protection, proposed consolidating equipment inventories under a holding entity to streamline depreciation schedules. The fluorescent tube above Vernon's bench buzzed and ticked. I pressed my knuckles into the edge of the desk and let the pressure ground me. I'd nodded through every meeting, signed where he pointed. Let him and Jocelyn handle the paperwork, because that's what they did, and the locks were what I did. Every recommendation, every document, every signature he collected from me over 18 months was raw material, templates for the forgeries. He wasn't restructuring the business. He was cataloging every asset for extraction deed by deed, and I'd handed him the blueprints myself. The heat started at the base of my skull and spread down my spine like current through a wire. I gripped the edge of the desk until the laminate bit into my palms. I scrolled further. I pulled up our business scheduling system and cross-referenced the dates of the 7 notarized filings from the county recorder against my own service call log. Every single filing date fell on a day I was out of state on a commercial installation. Then I checked Jocelyn's calendar entries. Each of those same dates showed a blocked appointment, no client name, just the notation MK Columbus. The same days I was 100 miles away on service calls. He'd notarized my forged signature on documents while sitting across from my wife in his office, and I'd been out installing deadbolts for people who trusted me. I closed the laptop. The shop was dark except for the glow of the exit sign above the back door. Vernon's bench was clean, tools hung on the pegboard in the same positions they'd occupied for 40 years. The recorder sat where he'd left it, red light off. I spread the photocopied deeds across my own workbench. 7 documents. Keating's bar registration printout, Gale's notebook, the bank transfer records, all of it laid out under the magnifying lamp-like evidence on a CID table in Heidelberg. The lamp's heat warmed the back of my hand. The faint smell of brass filings rose from the bench surface. Decades of metal dust worked into the grain. 2 options. Keep building the case in silence. Subpoena Keating's records. Hire a forensic accountant. Assemble a prosecutorial package and hand it to the Licking County DA clean. Methodical. The CID way. Or sit across from her at the kitchen table and watch her face when I put the documents down. The CID way was smarter. But I needed to see her eyes. I needed to know if there was anything left of the woman I'd married, or if she'd been running this operation since the day she walked into my office. I drove home. She was making pasta. I sat down at the oak table and placed 2 documents between the salt shaker and the napkin holder. The LLC registration for Pratt Security Solutions listing Brooke as sole member, and Miles Keating's Ohio State Bar registration showing family law as his practice area. "What's this?" Jocelyn asked. She set her spatula on the counter and sat across from me. "You tell me." She glanced at the papers. Her fingers went to the gold J pendant at her throat. "I don't understand what I'm looking at, Levi." "That's your sister's LLC, the one receiving our money. And that's your financial advisor's bar registration. He's a divorce attorney." "Lower your voice. You're being irrational." "I haven't raised my voice." She leaned back. The pendant turned between her fingers. The warmth drained from her eyes. What replaced it was flat and appraising, the look you give a problem that's outlived its usefulness. "You cut keys, Levi. Your father cut keys before you. And what did it get him? A strip mall and a son too simple to read his own books. I made this into something. You were just the help." My hands balled into fists under the table. The knuckles ground against each other. Every nerve in my body wanted to drive to the courthouse, go back to the police station, call a federal agent, burn the whole thing down tonight. I could feel my pulse in my teeth. I unclenched my hands, 1 finger at a time. "I appreciate you telling me what you really think," I said. I pushed back from the table and walked to the garage. Didn't turn on the light. Just sat on the stool among the padlock cases and breathed until my heart rate dropped below 100. No lock in my hands this time. I didn't trust myself to hold anything. No phone calls. No texts. No moves. Patience is the weapon. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Tanner. Not a call but a photo. A school project. A family tree drawn in colored pencil on poster board. At the roots, in his 17-year-old handwriting, Hargrove Security, Est. 1976. The phone's glow caught the nearest glass case, and for a second a row of Victorian padlocks flickered into view, brass and iron faces watching from the dark. Then the screen dimmed and they disappeared. I stared at the dark. 3 days later, a deputy served me papers in the shop parking lot. Young guy, square jaw, kept his eyes on the clipboard. He handed me the envelope and said, "I'm sorry about this, sir," without looking up. Jocelyn had filed an ex parte civil protection order claiming I'd become threatening during a domestic confrontation. A judge granted it the same afternoon without hearing my side. The order barred me from the house, from the shop, from all joint accounts. Everything I'd built with my father, every truck with our name on the door, every commercial contract, every tool on Vernon's bench, all of it behind a legal wall I couldn't touch. The bank couldn't stop her from draining the accounts. but a judge could stop me from touching them. I stood in the parking lot holding the CPO paperwork, watching the shop lights through the window. Vernon was in there, cutting keys, humming, locked out of my home, my shop, my accounts. But I still had one thing Jocelyn didn't know about, a debt from Heidelberg that was about to come due. I bought a prepaid phone at the gas station off I-70. $12 cash, no ID required. The CPO meant Jocelyn's attorney could subpoena my cell records, and I wasn't giving them a timeline. The irony wasn't lost on me. She had a burner. Now I had one too. Clyde Renfro picked up on the second ring. Former Army, CID, same unit as me, now a licensed PI working out of a second-floor office in Columbus. Built like a fireplace, wide through the shoulders and chest, thick forearms. He filled a doorway without trying. We'd worked fraud cases together on 3 installations. In Heidelberg in '98, he'd walked into a room he shouldn't have walked into, and I'd made sure he walked back out. He never forgot it, neither did I. How many evidence bags should I bring? He said, all of them. His office overlooked the I-70 interchange. Filing cabinets floor to ceiling, a conference table scarred with coffee rings, and a whiteboard that took up the entire back wall. I spread the 7 forged deeds across the table with colored evidence stickers, red for the forgeries, blue for the bank records, yellow for Gail's notebook entries. Clyde uncapped a dry erase marker and started building a timeline on the whiteboard. Jocelyn on the left, Brooke on the right, Keating in the center, arrows connecting all 3. I'd kept my own work calendar synced to my phone, separate from the office scheduling system. Every service call, every out-of-state job, logged in the same app I'd used for years. The CPO couldn't touch what was already in my pocket. Subject Keating notarized all 7 instruments, Clyde said, tapping the whiteboard. On each date, his office calendar logged a meeting with you. Financial restructuring consultation. He turned to face me. You were in Zanesville on 2 of those dates. Toledo on 1. Ackerman on 3. How'd you get Keating's calendar? His firm uses an online booking system. Public-facing. Lists past appointments by client name for rescheduling purposes. Sloppy for a man running a fraud operation. Clyde pinned a printout to the board. He stamped documents he knew you never signed, while you were 100 miles away. Clyde pulled another sheet from his folder. There's more. Contacted the carrier ran Keating's cell records. Calls to a prepaid number, not Jocelyn's personal line. Separate device. Call logs match the filing dates exactly. Same prepaid number also called Brooke Pratt the morning of each filing. A burner phone. She'd kept a second phone in her purse for the entire operation. Every filing coordinated through a device I'd never seen and couldn't trace to our family plan. 3 days later, Clyde brought in Denise Weber, 61 years old, court-certified forensic document examiner with 30 years of casework. She'd testified in federal court more times than most attorneys had filed motions. Defense lawyers settled cases rather than face her on the stand. She spread the 7 deeds under a magnifying loupe and worked in silence. I watched her move from document to document with a pair of calipers and an ultraviolet light, measuring letter heights, checking ink absorption patterns, photographing each signature at 3 different magnifications. 40 minutes without a word. The only sounds were the click of her camera shutter and the hum of I-70 traffic through the window. Then she set down her instruments and opened a folder of comparison photographs. All 7 signatures are traced reproductions from a single exemplar, she said. Pen pressure is mechanically uniform across every document. Natural handwriting varies. You get micro tremors, speed changes, lift points that shift with posture and mood. Traced handwriting doesn't. The source signature is this one. She placed an enlarged photograph on the table. Hargrove Securities Commercial Insurance Renewal Form. My signature at the bottom, the original, the one Jocelyn had in the office files. She photocopied it and traced it 7 times, I said. That's consistent with the evidence, yes. And the tracing medium left indentation, marks visible under raking light. Whoever did this pressed hard. They wanted accuracy more than they wanted speed. 7 forged deeds, forensic confirmation, phone records linking all 3 conspirators, bank transfers totaling $287,000 to a shell company, and over $340,000 in assets stripped through the quitclaim deeds. More than $627,000 extracted from a business my father built with his hands. But I still needed to go back to the shop. I knew what I was doing. The CPO barred me from the premises. If Jocelyn's attorney found out, they could have me arrested, and every piece of evidence I'd built would be overshadowed by a violation. 5 minutes. That's all I needed. I drove to Cedar Falls on a Thursday morning, parked 2 blocks away, and walked through the service entrance while the crew was out on calls. Vernon was at his bench. Same position, same magnifying lamp, same humming. The recorder sat beside his elbow, red light off. "Morning, Dad." He looked up. "Levi, where you been? Jocelyn said you were traveling." The muscles behind my eyes tightened. "Just busy. Mind if I borrow your recorder?" "Battery's low on mine." He waved a hand. "Take it." Got 3 more in the drawer. I was in and out in 4 minutes. My hands didn't stop shaking until I hit the interstate. I drove back to Columbus with the recorder on the passenger seat, a small silver Olympus no bigger than a cigarette lighter. In Clyde's office, I plugged it into his computer and scrolled through the files. Hundreds of them. Vernon's mumbled reminders, ambient shop noise, customers asking about rekeying. Then a file dated 3 weeks before I found the first deed. 43 minutes long. Clyde looked at the timestamp, then at me. He left the room without being asked, closed the door behind him. I pressed play. Jocelyn's voice came through the speakers. Clear as glass. The same warm, patient tone she used when she wanted something, except this time it sounded rehearsed, practiced. Every word placed like a chess piece. "Levi wants you to sign these, Dad. He's just too proud to ask." Vernon's voice, thin and confused. "What are these for?" "It's just paperwork, Dad. Levi's been meaning to get to it, but you know how he is with the office stuff. He asked me to bring them by. Should I call him first? He's on a job in Toledo. You know he doesn't like to be bothered on installs. Just sign here and here. This one too." The sound of a pen on paper. Vernon's breathing, shallow and trusting. A man who'd built a business with his hands for 40 years, signing it away because his son's wife told him his son wanted it. My jaw locked so hard my molars ground together. The sound filled my skull. My eyes burned, dry heat behind the lids that wouldn't break. I sat in that chair and listened to every second, all 43 minutes. Jocelyn's voice coaching him through each signature line. Vernon asking twice more if he should call me. Jocelyn redirecting him each time with the same rehearsed patience she used to schedule dental appointments. When the recording ended, the office was silent except for the hum of I-70 traffic through the window. That night, I sat in the parking lot outside Clyde's building. Engine off, hands on the steering wheel. The cold metal of the door handle pressed against my elbow where my arm rested. The investigation had cost me 3 weeks away from Tanner. Vernon didn't understand why I wasn't at the shop. My savings were draining into Clyde's retainer and Denise's analysis fees. And every morning I woke up in a motel room that smelled like industrial carpet cleaner instead of brass shavings and coffee. I reached for the ignition. I could drive to Keating's office tomorrow, offer to settle, walk away from the business, keep joint custody of Tanner, let Jocelyn have the money. I could rent a shop in Columbus, cut keys under a different name. Tanner could visit on weekends. Start over somewhere. Nobody knew the Hargrove name or what it used to stand for. Stop fighting. Let it go. The ignition key sat between my fingers. I turned it halfway, enough to power the dash lights. The truck hummed, ready to move. My phone screen lit up on the passenger seat. One missed call. Tanner, 9:47 p.m. No voicemail. Just the silence of a 17-year-old who didn't know what to say to a father he couldn't reach. I stared at that screen until it dimmed. Then I stared at the dark. Vernon built that business with his hands. 40 years of showing up, and Tanner had drawn it at the roots of his family tree. Vernon always hosted the 4th of July. Hot dogs on the strip mall sidewalk, sparklers for the neighbors' kids, his recorder running on the bench to capture the laughter he'd forget by morning. This year, he'd be standing on that sidewalk with no idea his name had been stolen off the door. I turned the key the rest of the way. The engine caught. I pulled back into the lot, parked, walked inside. The hallway smelled like coffee and dry erase markers and highway exhaust drifting through an open window. Clyde was still at his desk. "We're building evidence packages," I said. "Prosecutorial grade. I want it ready by the 4th of July. Clyde didn't ask why. He opened a new case folder. The CPO hearing was in 9 days, and it was assigned to Judge Ruth Ackerman, the same judge who sent a title company owner to prison for deed forgery. 9 days later, I sat at the respondent's table in Judge Ackerman's courtroom. The room smelled like floor polish and old wood. My palms were dry. My pulse was steady. The calm before a breach. Jocelyn sat at the petitioner's table with her attorney, a young guy in a department store suit who kept straightening his tie. She wore the same coordinated outfit she'd wear to a client dinner. Hair perfect, posture perfect. The gold J pendant catching the overhead lights. Clyde sat in the gallery row directly behind me, close enough to pass documents. Beside me at the respondent's table was Ed Barlow, a litigation attorney Clyde had brought in from Columbus. Sharp-jawed, quiet-voiced, the kind of lawyer who let evidence do the talking. Ed had 2 evidence binders in front of him and Denise Weber's 40-page forensic report. Judge Ackerman read the petition for 6 minutes without looking up. Jocelyn's attorney went first. "Your Honor, my client filed for protection after a threatening domestic confrontation in which the respondent became aggressive, raised his voice, and made statements my client interpreted as intimidating. She feared for her physical safety and sought the court's protection." Ackerman still hadn't raised her eyes from the petition. "Counsel, I've read the filing. I'd like to hear from the respondent." Ed stood. "Your Honor, we have forensic evidence that the petitioner forged the respondent's signature on 7 quitclaim deeds transferring over $600,000 in business assets to a shell company controlled by her sister. The CPO was filed 3 days after the respondent confronted her with this evidence. We submit that the filing is retaliatory." Jocelyn's attorney was on his feet. "Your Honor, the alleged financial dispute is a separate civil matter and has no bearing on my client's legitimate safety concerns." Ackerman looked at him over her reading glasses. "I'll decide what has bearing, counsel." Ed placed the first binder on the bench. Denise Weber's report. 7 photographs of traced signatures beside the original exemplar. Ackerman opened it and studied the comparison images. The courtroom was silent, except for the ventilation system humming through the ceiling vents. She turned pages slowly. A full minute passed, then another. My jaw was tight. I loosened it deliberately, the way you ease tension off a torque wrench before it strips the bolt. Is the petitioner's forensic expert present to rebut this analysis? Ackerman asked. Jocelyn's attorney looked at his notes. Your Honor, we haven't retained. The CPO is dismissed. Ackerman closed the binder. The restrictions on the respondent are lifted effective immediately. Counsel, if I see another filing from your client that appears designed to obstruct a fraud investigation, I will refer it to the bar. Jocelyn's face went blank. Not surprised. Empty. Like a lock with the pins pulled. I walked out of the courthouse into May sunlight, my chest expanded. The first full breath I'd taken in weeks. But the case wasn't finished. It was barely started. 6 weeks stretched between the courthouse steps and the 4th of July, and every one of them cost something. Vernon asked where I'd been 3 times a day, and I ran out of answers that didn't involve lying to my father. Tanner stopped calling and started texting single words. Okay, fine, sure, the language of a 17-year-old who'd stopped expecting explanations. Clyde's retainer ate through my savings at a pace that made me check the balance every morning. And every morning, the number was lower. I built the case. Clyde built the case. Denise refined her report. We worked and we waited. The 4th of July BBQ had been on Vernon's calendar since 1982. Same pavilion, same barrel grills, same invitation list that grew every year as the client roster expanded. I didn't change a thing, sent the same invitations, ordered the same hot dogs and hamburger patties from Kessler's butcher shop, strung the same lights between the pavilion posts. The smell of charcoal lighter fluid hung in the afternoon heat, and ice crashed into coolers with that hollow drum sound that meant summer. 63 people confirmed. Commercial clients, neighbors, Vernon's church friends, the guys from the shop. Every person who mattered in our world gathered in one place on the same 3 acres where we'd gathered every year. Jocelyn came. I knew she would. Showing up was the performance. Staying away was the confession. She stood near the drink table with a glass of lemonade, working the crowd the way she always did, touching arms, remembering names. The practiced warmth turned up to its highest setting. A few people were stiffer than usual. Word travels in a town like Cedar Falls. But she smiled through it. Clyde stood near the back fence with a plate of potato salad, positioned where he could see the driveway and the pavilion at the same time. Professional habit. He caught my eye once and gave a short nod. Everything in place. I waited until the sun dropped behind the tree line and the string lights took over. The charcoal smoke drifted low across the yard. Cicadas filled the gaps between conversations. I walked to the pavilion where the PA system sat on a folding table beside a cooler of sodas. Vernon stood beside me. I hadn't asked him to. He'd walked up on his own, recorder in his shirt pocket, and positioned himself at my right shoulder like he was taking his place at the bench. He stood straighter than I'd seen him stand in months. His hand found my shoulder for a moment, then dropped to his side. Evening, everyone, I said into the microphone. The conversations died in clusters, front to back. Most of you have been coming to this BBQ for years. Some of you, decades. You know my father. You know this business. You trusted us with your buildings, your schools, your dealerships. I need to tell you something about that trust. I gripped the edge of the folding table. My hands were steady. My mouth was dry, but my voice was clear. Over the past 18 months, 7 quitclaim deeds were filed at the Licking County Recorder's Office, bearing my forged signature. Each one transferred a piece of Hargrove security to a shell company called Pratt Security Solutions, LLC, registered to my sister-in-law Brooke Pratt at a UPS store mailbox in Fairfield County. Vehicle fleet, equipment inventories, commercial lease assignments, client contract portfolios. Every deed was filed on a day I was out of state on a service call. Every deed was notarized by an attorney named Miles Keating, who sat in my office 18 months ago and told me he was a financial consultant. He's a divorce lawyer. Nobody moved. A paper plate blew off a table. Nobody picked it up. $287,000 was wired out of our operating account in 31 transfers over 9 months. Every wire was initiated by my wife using her authorized signer credentials. Every destination was the same shell company. I paused. Let the numbers sit in the air. Some of you are holding contracts that don't belong to Hargrove Security anymore. Not because you signed them away, because someone signed for you. I turned to Vernon. His hand rested on the recorder in his pocket. His eyes were clear. Clearer than they'd been in months. Dad, you want them to hear it? Vernon nodded once. Play it. I pressed the recorder's speaker against the PA microphone. 30 seconds. That's all I played. Jocelyn's voice filled the yard, warm and patient and rehearsed. Levi wants you to sign these, Dad. He's just too proud to ask. Vernon's voice, thin and confused. Should I call him first? Somewhere down the road, an early firework popped. Nobody flinched, and Jocelyn again, smooth as a sales pitch. He's on a job in Toledo. Just sign here. The recording stopped. The silence that replaced it was physical. It pressed against my eardrums. The cicadas kept on. Nothing else did. I set the recorder down. Something behind my sternum loosened. A knot I'd been carrying since the morning I found that deed in the second drawer. Not relief, not yet, just the feeling of a lock yielding after months of picking. I walked to Jocelyn. She stood frozen at the drink table, lemonade still in her hand, the glass tilting at an angle that would spill in another second. Her lips parted, closed, parted again. The smooth phrasing, the practiced calm, the deflections she kept loaded, all of it gone. Her free hand went to the pendant at her throat and closed around it like a lifeline. I spoke low enough that she had to lean forward. You didn't steal a company, Jocelyn. You stole proof that my father's life mattered. And you used his love for me to do it. That's why this is happening. Her mouth opened one more time. Nothing came out. She set the glass on the table, turned, and walked to her car. Steady pace, straight back. She didn't look back. Not once. Her heels clicked on the gravel driveway, and not one voice called after her. The taillights flared at the end of the drive and disappeared. I turned. 3 men I'd installed access systems for, standing in the glow of the string lights, already dialing. By Monday morning, those calls had reached people Jocelyn never expected, including the Licking County Prosecutor's Office. The Licking County Prosecutor's Office moved faster than I expected, but not before Jocelyn's attorney tried to slow it down. The Monday after the BBQ, he filed an emergency motion to suppress Vernon's recording, arguing it was obtained without consent and constituted an illegal wiretap under Ohio's one-party consent statute. My stomach tightened when Ed Barlow called with the news. A cold wire ran from my gut to the base of my skull. Ed wasn't worried. Ohio is a one-party state, he said. Vernon was present for the conversation. He's the consenting party. The recorder was his, running on his own workbench, in his own shop. The motion is dead on arrival. He was right. Judge Ackerman denied it from the bench Wednesday morning without oral argument. 2 sentences in the ruling. But those 2 days, waiting, not knowing if the recording that held the entire case together would be thrown out before the grand jury ever heard it, I didn't sleep. I sat in Clyde's office and stared at the whiteboard timeline and ran my thumbnail along the edge of the desk until the laminate left a groove in the skin. By that same Wednesday afternoon, the grand jury returned a 7-count indictment for felony forgery under Ohio Revised Code 29-113-41, one count for each quitclaim deed. Conspiracy charges named all three of them: Jocelyn, Brooke, Keating, and based on Vernon's recording, 2 counts of theft from a person over 65 under 29113.02, what the statute calls elder exploitation when the victim's trust is weaponized by a caregiver or family member. The arraignment was Thursday morning. Judge Ackerman's courtroom, the same courtroom where she dismissed the CPO 6 weeks earlier. The same Judge Dale Whitfield had mentioned back in April, the one who sent a title company owner to prison for deed forgery. When Jocelyn's attorney saw the case assignment, he asked for a transfer. Denied. The wooden bench was cold under my palms. The courtroom smelled like floor polish and old paper, and the faint metallic tang of the heating vents pushing air through century-old ductwork. I sat behind Ed Barlow and watched the three of them stand at the defense table. Jocelyn in the center, Brooke on her left, smaller, shoulders drawn in. Keating on the right, jaw set, staring at a point above the judge's head. The financial freeze came first. Every asset transferred to Pratt Security Solutions, locked by court order pending criminal proceedings. Jocelyn's personal accounts seized. The $287,000 in wire transfers flagged for recovery. The vehicle fleet and equipment valued at $340,000 frozen in place. What took 18 months to steal took one judge's signature to stop. Brooks LLC was dissolved the same week. Pratt Security Solutions, the company that existed only to receive stolen property, reduced to a single filing at the Fairfield County Recorder's Office. 11 months of careful construction. One page to tear it down. Keating's world came apart on a different axis. The Ohio State Bar opened disbarment proceedings within 48 hours of the indictment. His notary commission was suspended pending investigation. 7 forged notarizations on 7 documents, each one a separate violation. The man who'd sat in my office and shaken my hand while building the legal architecture to rob me couldn't practice law, couldn't notarize a document, couldn't walk into a courtroom without being the defendant. Ed Barlow called me that Friday. Something loosened in the back of my neck when I heard his voice. Not relief, just the absence of bracing. Keating's firm is shutting down, he said. His partners filed dissolution papers this morning. Nobody wants their name next to his. How's his attorney positioning the defense? Cooperation, full disclosure in exchange for reduced charges. He's already turned over his calendar, his billing records, and the prepaid phone logs. So he's rolling on Jocelyn like a barrel down a hill. The social collapse was quieter, but just as total. Cedar Falls is a small town. The recording from the BBQ didn't need the internet to spread. It moved through the PTA phone tree, the church volunteer network, the Main Street coffee counter, where people lingered over second cups and shared what they'd heard. I heard it secondhand from Phil Garrity at the bank. He was depositing a check for the business account we'd unfrozen, and he paused at the counter with that look people get when they're deciding whether to repeat something. Fellow at the diner this morning, Phil said, told his buddy, whatever you do, don't get Jocelyn. He shook his head, meaning, don't let someone smile at you while they empty your pockets. It's making the rounds. Within a week, nobody returned her calls. The women who'd coordinated fundraisers with her, who'd sat beside her at school board meetings, who'd complimented her scrapbooks and admired her organizational skills, every one of them went silent. 15 years of connections, gone in the time it took a 30-second recording to play through a PA speaker. 3 weeks after the indictment, Brooke broke. Her attorney, a public defender from Lancaster, advised full cooperation with the prosecution in exchange for a reduced charge. She gave a deposition that afternoon, named dates, described meetings, produced text messages from the prepaid phone Jocelyn kept in her purse. When they asked why she'd gone along with it, she said Jocelyn told her the money was already theirs, that I'd agreed to the transfers and was just too proud to sign the papers myself. The same lie she'd used on Vernon. Tanner came to the shop on a Saturday, 4 weeks after the arraignment. He didn't call first, just showed up at 9 in the morning, standing in the service bay with his hands in his jacket pockets. The fluorescent tubes hummed overhead. Vernon's bench was clean. Tools hung on the pegboard, and the faint smell of brass shavings rose from the wood the way it always did on warm mornings. Tanner stood there looking at Vernon's bench the way you look at something you're afraid might not be there tomorrow. "Can I stay with you?" he said. "You don't have to ask. Mom says you're trying to destroy her. What do you think?" He looked at the shadow box on the wall, where the original key blank from our first job hung behind glass. "I think Grandpa's name is on the building," Tanner said. And she tried to take it off. My throat closed. I put my hand on his shoulder and squeezed once. He didn't pull away. Every key she had, every lock she opened with my trust. Vernon's workbench, where she walked a confused old man through forged signature lines, the filing cabinet where she hid the deeds, the office door she rekeyed without telling me. Each access point I'd given her over 23 years of marriage was now a count on the indictment. 7 forgeries, 2 elder exploitation charges, conspiracy, wire fraud. I'd handed her the keys to every room in my life, and she'd used each one to carry something out. The scrapbook surfaced 2 weeks before trial. Detectives executing a court-ordered search of Jocelyn's vehicle found a zippered tote bag in the trunk. Inside, a leather-bound album in the same cognac binding as the 14 family scrapbooks displayed in our living room. Smaller, private. The cover read "New Chapter" in silver calligraphy. Clyde called me from the prosecutor's office. "You need to see this." "What's in it?" "Real estate listings. Hilton Head, South Carolina. Beachfront properties." Paper-clipped to handwritten budget spreadsheets in her handwriting. The dollar amounts matched the wire transfers to the penny. Target move-in dates circled in red. He texted me a photo of the first page. I opened it on my phone and stared at Jocelyn's handwriting. The same neat cursive she used for birthday cards and grocery lists, mapping out a new life on the South Carolina coast with stolen money broken into line items. Moving costs, furniture, first-year expenses. Every number precise. Every category color-coded. My spine straightened against the back of the chair. A cold clarity settled behind my eyes. "She scrapbooked it," I said. Every page, color-coded. Timeline on the inside cover. The woman who scrapbooked The Perfect Family had scrapbooked her own conviction. But there was one person I still hadn't faced. If this hit home, like this video because the algorithm uses your like to find others like us, tell me, what would you have done in my place? Vernon was at his bench when I pulled in at 6. Same spot, same magnifying lamp throwing a warm circle on the scarred maple. Brass shavings curled off a Schlage blank and caught the early light. The shop smelled like metal filings and fresh coffee, same as it had for 40 years. He was humming something. I still didn't recognize the tune. Jocelyn received 4 years. 7 counts of felony forgery under Ohio Revised Code 291331, 2 counts of elder exploitation under 2913.02. Judge Ackerman handed down the sentence on a Tuesday morning in September. Jocelyn stood at the defense table in a county-issued jumpsuit. No pendant, no blown-out hair, no coordinated outfit. She looked at me once. I looked back. The bailiff led her through the side door. The latch caught with a sound like a deadbolt turning home, and she was gone. Keating was disbarred. The Ohio State Bar revoked his license 3 weeks before his criminal sentencing. 18 months for conspiracy and forgery. His office on Broad Street sat empty. The sign came down in October. Brooke cooperated. 2 years probation, community service, full restitution. I never spoke to her again. The morning after sentencing, I woke up in my own bed for the first time in months and stared at the ceiling. My shoulders ached, not from tension, from the absence of it. The muscles had been locked for so long, they didn't know what to do with slack. Some mornings Vernon asks where my mother is. Forgets she's been gone for decades. I tell him she's resting. He nods and goes back to his keys. On those mornings, the shop feels larger than it is, and the hum of the fluorescent tubes sounds like something I can't name. Tanner works weekends now. He shows up at 8, ties on an apron, and learns the trade. Good hands. Steady. He measures twice without being told, same as Vernon did, same as I did. He doesn't mention his mother by name, just says she in a flat voice that puts a dull pressure behind my ribs every time I hear it. 17 years old and already carrying weight no kid should have to lift. I'd do it again, but I won't pretend it didn't cost me. The look on Tanner's face when Jocelyn was led from the courtroom. Vernon's confusion deepening during the months I couldn't be at the shop. The anger that locked my jaw and kept me awake at 3 in the morning for half a year. Winning doesn't undo any of that. It just clears the bench so you can start the next job. All 40 commercial clients came back. Every contract restored. The trucks still have our name on the doors. If someone handles your money, check the books yourself. Every month, no exceptions. Trust is not a financial strategy. I learned that at a cost of $627,000 and 25 years of marriage. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out the original key blank from our first job. Jocelyn had taken it down from the shadow box to make room for a corporate award plaque. I found it in a drawer during the cleanup after the sentencing. The brass was tarnished, but the cuts were still clean. It was cold between my fingers. I hung it back on the hook behind the glass. The brass clicked against the backing. I closed the frame. Vernon looked up from his bench. His eyes tracked to the shadow box on the wall. He studied it for a long moment, the way he studies a blank before the first cut. He nodded once, said nothing. That was enough. My revenge is finished, but yours might be just beginning. Tell me what happened to you in the comments, because this is a safe place to be heard. Share this with someone who's been through it.